So today we will start the security operations. Now, the security operations doesn't mean, running a SOC. I always say, everyone says running a SOC. No. Security operations mean whatever you've done from domain 1 to domain 6, you have to run it. Okay. You have to run it efficiently so that your organization remains secure. So that's the aim of domain 7, and preserving the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your all the information systems. Okay. That is the aim of domain 7, that how to run it effectively. Okay. Now, organizations, you will see, will go through multiple issues, problems. They keep coming. Okay. So you need to understand two fundamental concepts before we go for security operations. Now, first fundamental concept in security operations is of need to know and least privilege. Okay. This should be very aptly clear. We have discussed this many times. Whenever you are giving access to information systems, you have to give it on need to know basis. Okay. If you don't need to know, you might have the clearance. Having a clearance doesn't mean you need to know. Whenever you are taking decisions of access, you have to see, okay, this person has the, he might be the CIO or CTO or senior manager, but he doesn't need to know this information. If he doesn't need to know this information, then the access should not be granted. This is a fundamental concept, right? Many times in organizations, when we are, providing access, what we do, we provide all the access, right? And that is the granularity at which you need to go whenever you are giving access. And the need to know basis is the fundamental, concept by which you grant access. Similarly, is the least privilege. Whenever you are giving some access, okay, you ensure that you give the minimum access levels, minimum privileges. This will ensure that you have a minimum baseline of access. And if somebody wants additional privileges, they request for it. There's a request which is done for any additional privileges. This way, what will happen? This way, what first thing happens is everybody is at a very, very minimum access level. So even if somebody gets hacked, privileges are not escalated. That is one very, very fundamental concept, right? Secondly, you have a very strong baseline for security. Everybody is given minimum access levels. So it's a very strong baseline for security, right? Now, how do you ensure least privileges are given? You do groupings, right? You create groups. You create role-based access, right? You create role-based access. Now so admins will have admin level roles, okay? Users will have user level roles. So that is how you give least privilege access. But need to know access is given to critical information systems, and those are on need to know basis. You give special access. There has to be a process defined to give access to information which is need to know. So very fundamental concepts. Do not mix both. They are both different concepts. Okay. Second is segregation of responsibilities. Now, segregation of responsibilities means that, any critical task, if there is a critical task, we have also discussed this earlier also, critical tasks should be segregated between two people. Okay. People, process, whatever, right? Why? Okay, so firstly, any critical task should not be left dependent on one person, because then, if say this is the firewall, right? And to change the firewall ports, you need the approval of the L1 and the approval of the L3. Say, okay. The L1 trying to directly change the ports should not be allowed because it's a critical task. Okay. So that will lead to a security vulnerability. And that's why two-person control leads to a segregation of responsibility. Generally, the person who approves, right, is not the person who executes the change. Okay? So if the approval authority is L3, the executing authority is, say, L1. Similarly, L1 also should not be able to execute unless the approval comes in. Okay, it should not happen that L1 can go on his own and without any approval should be able to execute a critical task, and that's why segregation of responsibilities is very, very important. Okay, now in finance, it is done very, very. In finance, we do it many times that somebody who's the procurement officer, okay, does something. Okay, the billing officer does something, and the invoicing officer does something, right? The procurement officer only does the market research and gives vendors the 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then the selection committee selects, okay, we will select vendor 2. Okay, based on that, the billing officer will go. So there is complete segregation of critical tasks so that there is no conflict of interest. There is no, what do you call that term? When two people connive, two people combined, we had this concept in domain 2, right? Domain 2 and 3. Two people should not be able to collude. Two people, I forget this word that time. So two people should not be able to collude and execute a critical task, and that's why segregation of responsibilities is very, very important, right? Then third is, in security operations, when you are operating the organizational security, privileged account management. You have to have very, very critical insight into what are those privilege accounts. Okay, who is responsible? Okay, and are you auditing it in time? Because privileged accounts needs to be consistently audited, because privileged accounts have access to very, very higher permissions, and if privileged accounts get hacked, your organizations get hacked. If you look at the recent hacks, whether MGM, any privileged accounts had got hacked. Okay, there was not some very sophisticated attacks which took place. They're very, very simple, username, password change attacks. Hackers went to the customer support, requesting for a change, and then constant bombarding of MFA to the user, and finally they got an access. Okay. So privileged account management is very, very critical when you are operating your security in your organization. Okay. The next is job rotation. We've seen this concept also. It is very important that critical people in the critical roles, not only in information, finance, people who are handling critical roles, okay, they are rotated. Rotated because what happens in rotation? What happens? One person goes to other desk. There you can find out any irregularities. Okay, so job rotation is a detection technique for finding any irregularities or any ill intent, basically towards identifying any internal threats. Okay, because when you rotate a job, the next person goes and sees, okay, there is something wrong in this account and can report. It's a good practice to have job rotation. In many organizations, job rotation is followed very, very religiously, at least in financial institutions. Okay. Then next is service level agreements. Now, most of the organizations will have a lot of dependencies on third parties. You cannot, in today's world, you cannot survive without outsourcing your work on third parties. You cannot execute everything yourself. So third parties, you are dependent, and the only way you can manage the security implications from third parties is by having very, very strong service level agreements. Okay, so it's very important that you visit and revisit your SLAs time to time. Okay, so that you see that things are not going out of security scope. So these are the fundamental concepts when you are operating your security operations, right? Then resource protection. Next topic is resource protection. So you have multiple resources, right? You have your routers, you have switches, okay, you have firewalls, you have endpoints, okay, you have networking cables, they're running across. So you need to protect that, right? You need to have physical protection. Okay, you have to understand what are the physical protection requirements for these devices. You need to understand what are the logical protection requirements. Okay, like we need to have patch management, vulnerability management of all these devices, right? So this will form part of your audit routine, that, okay, these are the requirements of these devices and are they being met or not. Okay. Another part of resource protection is the media management. Okay. I recently went to a very big company, one of the largest companies in India, and I was surprised to know that they still use tape-based backup. They said we cannot replace it right now. They still use tape-based backup. Okay, 20-year-old company. Okay, they still use tape-based backup. That means they have to account for these tapes and then protect it. Okay, and then they have to go through a life cycle management. And I was not surprised because, of course, their systems have been in production right now and they cannot change it. So they have to bring it a storage-based system to change the complete tape-based protection. So that means for them, media management becomes very, very important. Where, when the tape gets over, where do they keep it? Where do they store it? How, say, tape-based backups are basically, they are a round tape, big tape. Okay, they're stored in media library. So there is stack of libraries and you stack the media inside, such libraries. Okay. And then there's a person who is the media guardian, who is the librarian. Okay. And access is not allowed. So now, whenever you are storing media here, it has to be managed properly, right? Otherwise, there will be, magnet tapes, they go faulty with weather. So you need to have proper HVAC. So, and then you have to have access control policy. Who is going inside the media library, right? The protection of the tape itself, tape of quality of the tape, right? In case there is some regulatory requirement to protect this tape. Why are they keeping it? Because as per the RBI's mandate, they have to keep the data for 15 years. So 15 years, they have to maintain the data. After that, how do they dispose it? Disposal is also a very, very critical issue, right? You dispose this and you find some critical information in the disposal, right? So media protection itself is very, very critical if you are in an organization where media management is required. Whereas newer companies will not have this issue because most of the information will be on storage area networks. But companies which are traditional, which are dealing with financial instruments, they do have such large tape-based backups. And therefore, media protection is very, very important. Okay. You also have to take care of the data which is at rest and which is at motion. So wherever you find data is in rest, whether encryption is required or not, okay, you have to find that controls. But first, you have to see whether the data is labeled or not. Okay. And do you have a data classification policy? And has it been implemented? And based on the classification, do you need encryption? Do you need to store it? And same for the data when it has to go into motion, right? So you have to devise a methodology to protect your resources which are employed in your organization. Right. Now, next is whenever you're operating your security, what you will find is your incidents. Okay. There will be issues, there will be events which will get converted into incidents. Now, what are events and what are incidents? Anyone?
Any operation breaks, then we call that as incident. Any new thing is maybe a new one.
Event is something, some occurrence. Something has happened. Okay. Some occurrence which has happened. Event may be a normal event, may not be a normal event. You don't know. Event is some occurrence. Now you have to find out that is it bad or good. If it is bad, then it gets converted into an incident, right? If it is good or you cannot determine, then you discard it. Right? As far as security operations is concerned, something has happened, some noise has come, okay, and you try to evaluate. You have to analyze this to convert it into an incident. The moment it converts into incident, what happens is your incident management process kicks in. So your incident management process has to kick in the moment your event gets tagged as an incident, right? So we will see the incident management flow. So the first thing is, when you say that there's going to be an event, firstly, you need to have eyes to see this event, right? If you don't have eyes to see this event, you cannot even tag it as an incident, right? So that means first of the most important part is observability. Do you have the observability capability to observe that something is going wrong? That means you need, first step is detect. So unless you have detection capabilities, you cannot actually find out if there is an event happening or an incident happening. Okay, you will not have any capability. Now, detection can be at multiple levels. Detection can be at physical levels. How do we do physical detections? Okay, we can have a guard, we can have eyes, we can have CCTV. Okay, we can have intrusion detection system, physical intrusion detection systems. You can have walls, you can have fences, right? Many ways. Okay, now then technical. Okay, say network. How do you do network intrusion detection or network detection if you want to have visibility? You have many tools. You have Wireshark. Okay, you have NDR systems. Okay, you can have network monitoring. Right. So you need to monitor your network. You need detection capabilities. Right. Okay. So then what else after network? What else? Okay. Your the hosts. So what happens? How do you detect on host? You need some kind of a host-based. Uh, you need some kind of host-based intrusion detection system. Okay. And network, you can have an IDS also, network-based intrusion detection systems. Right. So you need some kind of a capability to detect. Okay. Also, in security operations, you will have a lot of logs. Okay, and logs gives you insights. That means if you correlate and corroborate logs, you can have detection capabilities. And that's why today you take a lot of logs, ingest it into an SIEM systems, and then you have visibility. Okay, or this observability is achieved from this SIEM. Am I clear as far as detection is concerned? Any doubts, anyone? Right. So you have detected it. Okay, something has happened.